what really drew me to BJC is the fact that the senior executives really walk the talk.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mission-based organization. It's a nonprofit organization. So it's not all about revenue and money, although that's important because we need that to provide the services we do.
Right.
But it's really, truly, how do we help the communities in which we serve? How do we get people the best outcomes that they can get from a healthcare perspective?
Welcome to the Risk Never Sleeps podcast, in which we discuss and explore the individuals that are protecting patient safety and delivering patient care. Today, I am pleased to be joined by Matt Modica, CISO at BJC HealthCare. Did I get that correctly? That is.
You got it.
Okay,
you got
awesome,
it right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, Matt, welcome to the program. Excited for you to join us today. Our listeners are excited. You got a really interesting background, so we're going to dive into that in a little bit. And then I think we got some funds in store for later on too, to explore. If we got some time here about what you do when you're not protecting patient safety and patient data at BJC. So tell us about your current role in your organization.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm the CISO for BJC HealthCare. It's a Midwest, a regional healthcare system, provider system in Midwest, St. Louis metro region primarily, but Missouri, Illinois. Kind of go, mid-state, middle of the state in Missouri, into the middle of the state in Illinois, if you think about that kind of from a region perspective. Put size and scale on the perspective. So we have 14 hospitals. We have over 200 clinics and acute care facilities. We have 32,000 employees. And when you take into account all of the external physicians and folks that need access to our systems, we're usually about 50,000 users that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Bed count for inpatient beds, we're sitting right at about 3,500 beds across those 14 hospitals. So yeah, large provider system. I've been with BJC now for just over 6 years, and I have been steadily building and sustaining the program.
Excellent. And how did you get into healthcare and IT?
That's a great question. So I'll start a little bit with my origin story, right? So I really wanted to be a graphic designer or an architect. I want to do one of those two.
It's very cool.
And how I got here was very meandered into this career, right? So long story short, basically went to college for that. Graduated from college, was at my wedding reception, and I didn't have a job yet. And my wife's cousin says, "You know what?" He worked for Edward Jones at the time, and he was a recruiter for them for technology, IT. And he said, "I know you want to get into graphic design. There's this really cool IT job that I think you'd be great at." And long story short, was able to get that job. My thought process was I was going to move into marketing or communications, as soon as I could after I got in. But I got into it, and it was essentially a business analyst role in IT. And I moved into project management, did project management work for many years, and then got into security, kind of focus toward the end of my stint there at Edward Jones for about 10 years, I guess. Got into, leading a security team of project managers and architects, right? So it was all about selection of technology, implementing change, that kind of stuff. And so it fit well with my project management love and skill that I've learned to love. And then also that's really when I started getting into security. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. And then, for a little bit, so worked there, and then I went to Express Scripts for about 8-9 years. Worked in a variety of security roles there. Started with, certification and accreditation for federal clients, and did vendor management, client security, identity and access management. Really dug into risk management and some of the more proactive technology stuff that we do in security. in that role. And then I moved to Equifax. I worked for Equifax for about 4 years. And with them, really came in as their BISO, Business Information Security Officer for the St. Louis kind of market and St. Louis based company that they had. And eventually it grew my responsibilities there to where I was responsible for all of the BISOs globally before I left, reporting directly to the CSO. And then was able to get this job back in the hometown and focused in an area I wanted to focus on. So yeah, kind of meandered about of, again, how do you get from graphic design to security and then ultimately to a CISO position? It's kind of a wild story, but it's been a fun ride so far.
And how has some of that experience and that background, especially in information risk management, helped prepare you for the BJC role?
So it all built upon itself, right? I mean, so it was as I was talking with my wife about it actually earlier today. I was just, how did I get from there to here? And I think luck was some of it. I think skill is another piece of it where I'm constantly learning, right? I'm constantly pushing myself to learn and understand more things. And so as I think about it, it's really those core skills of, from a business analyst and project management perspective. On the business analyst front, knowing your business, knowing your audience, understanding how you make money and why you do it or why you're providing the service you're providing, right? And having that tie to the mission and objective of the organization. That was key from a business analyst perspective.
So important.
Yeah. And then the project management component of, okay, get stuff done, right? Mm-hmm. How do you get stuff done on time, on budget, on schedule, in the right amount of energy and all that stuff put into it. And then, from a security perspective, is again, just the love of learning and constantly pushing myself. Right. So I've never been the super technology expert. I definitely dabble. I definitely understand. I can kind of perform the sniff test that I need to. Mm-hmm. But my real strengths have been really in the, how do I organize? How do I motivate? How do I deliver on what the organizations need that I support ultimately? And so it's, I think that and a lot of leadership training and a lot of people that put their faith in to do the right thing and ultimately trust me to try to do a job. Right. So
really great background of core building blocks. Obviously that puts you in a great position at BJC. Talk about the difference in the shared mission that you have in healthcare that maybe you hadn't seen in other organizations.
What really drew me to BJC is the fact that the senior executives really walk the talk. Mm-hmm. It's a mission-based organization. It's a nonprofit organization. So it's not all about revenue and money, although that's important because we need that to provide the services we do.
Right.
But it's really, truly, how do we help the communities in which we serve? How do we get people the best outcomes that they can get from a healthcare perspective? How do we educate the community? How do we help with social disparities? How do we, how do we serve ultimately? And that is huge from my background and my beliefs, right? As, my kind of three core values as I look for any organization for me is faith, family, and fun, right? And so I need to have something I'm going to have fun at. I need to have, something where I'm going to have good family work-life balance. And I do believe in God and I believe in faith, right? And so those things, when they all match, is great. What makes it even better, from a healthcare perspective, what's exciting about that is you have organizations like BJC that allow you to be your full self in the job, right? Warts and all. Right. And they recognize that and it's okay. And they embrace it. So the diversity component and making sure that we're, we're just allowing people to reach their full potential and do what they do best in the way they can do it best.
I love that.
That's really what drew me.
Being authentic is so important these days, and being able to bring the first rate version of yourself versus that second rate version of somebody else to work. And I love that. What are your top 3 priorities or strategic initiatives over the next year or two?
Really identity and data and endpoint, right? Would be the three components, right? So Endpoint, we're doing really good. Identity, we are continuing to work on that, right? So, how do we make sure we understand all of the users that are supposed to be in the environment, why they're supposed to be there, what role they're in, what job function they play, and continuing to push that principle of least privilege, right? So we've done a lot of work in the last 5-6 years around automating access management, around, getting things more efficient, making sure that we're doing things for our employee population. Our focus now is the non-employee population, right? And how do we make sure we know for sure who the third party is that needs access, and what they're doing on our system when they're in there doing that. So, so I'd say, really everything around that identity, understanding what they're doing, the behavioral components, the monitoring components, those kinds of things. Data loss prevention would be another one, right? And focusing on, where are all the data repositories and making sure that we have the crown jewels understood and protect the best we can. Not that we don't know what those are today, but validating it, right? Making sure that minimizing the amount of exports and things the amount of really the data that has to transfer back and forth. Healthcare, at least in my experience, there's a lot of older practices. We still use fax machines a lot, right? And it's not just us, it's all of the industry, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just, thinking about solutions of how can we get to maybe a different and more secure approach for that? How do we support that with some of the technologies and some of the things that we have in place? And with the data warehouse stuff that we're doing and a lot of the stuff we're doing from just from a data management perspective. We have a very good data analytics team that has been stood up and is working on things. So it's how do we leverage those investments in a secure way? Have security by design ultimately along the way there. Really the third thing, I know it's talked about endpoint, but I think we have that pretty well covered for zero trust. The biggest thing that I'm focused on right now is risk management. And making sure that the organization that I am reporting the right information to the management team at the organization to say, here's the quantified level of security risk that we have, right? Here is what we could do to buy down the risk, right? Here are the potential impacts and drawbacks of doing that. And ultimately presenting it as a business decision and working through that with my peers across the organization to help them understand that story and what we can do. Because I go back to, again, the last 5 years, it's been building the program, strengthening the program, getting the basics and the fundamentals right. And so we have all of the things that we need to have in place there now. Now it's a matter of, we're never going to be able to fix 100% of everything.
Right.
What are those most important things that we need to fix and should fix?
Exactly.
And do we agree on that as a management team?
Yeah, that alignment's so critical. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, congratulations on the FBI CISO Academy. That's true.
Oh, thank you.
Tell us more about what that means to you and what your experience was going through that.
Yeah. So, I've always been a strong supporter of our law enforcement, right? From local to federal. They are truly heroes, right? And I think participating in this, for those listeners that don't know what it is, the FBI CISO Academy or CISO Academy is, it's a select group of CISOs that are selected, and they have to be nominated and recommended by their local field office, their local FBI field office. And so it's really all about public-private relationship. How do we build and strengthen that and support each other in the shared mission of protecting our country, protecting our services, protecting our critical infrastructure across the whole United States. And how do we, bring consequences to those that are trying to have too much fun with our organization or with the country. And so it was a really great program. It's about a week in length, and I will compliment the FBI Cyber Division on what they have done. They've put together an incredible program where, for the week where we were cleared certain clearances, right? So we could get some additional briefings that aren't necessarily public. which was very insightful and to help us understand just how much effort and energy goes into the things that they're doing to ultimately protect us and ultimately help bring people to justice at the end of the day. And so it was very, very insightful from that perspective, very helpful to build those relationships even stronger, to have agents that have been, behind, as an example, the crackbot takedown and some of those other things, to speak directly to us and talk about, hey, here's how long it really took us to get there. Here are the things that we did to ultimately get behind the scenes and get behind who is behind all of this. And then here's what we did to take it down. And this day of action that occurred, right? And you can read some of the information about that takedown out there on the public news. So it was incredible. It was great. And, building the contacts and building the connections to fellow CISOs and to the FBI and other agencies. So they actually brought in their equivalent from Canada, right? So they had their Canada cyber folks come and join this session. They had, Department of Justice contacts. They had CISA contacts. They, NSA folks come and present. So it was really the whole of government kind of coming together to say, here's how we're trying to fight against that.
You probably got to see some, with the clearance, you probably got to see some real details around whether or not there was a compromise and any indication of compromise on a more broader scale. Is that accurate? Or
we received several briefings, right, on just the state of critical infrastructure, right? So if you think about power, or you think about utility, you think about or just general utilities, you think about any other critical infrastructure, healthcare. They did help articulate, hey, here's reality, right? Here's what we think we're dealing with. And here's where you need to be focused, CISOs. And so it's very good to have that bi-directional communication. A lot of times people will say, well, gosh, my experience with the FBI is it's a one-way street. And I can understand that, right? But you have to be understanding that there are some things that are national security that they just can't share. Right. Yeah. And they're working every day with their law enforcement partners and other partners across the government to make that faster and to get that actionable information back. But a lot of time, we have laws and we have privacy for a reason in this country. Yeah. So they're working through all those things in the right way. But they're ultimately trying to get things in our hands faster. So
yeah, I definitely see that. Last couple of years have been tough with the pandemic. How do you think we're doing as an industry? Based on conversation with the peers or what you're seeing in general?
Probably two aspects, right? If I think about it from a pure cyber perspective, right? The threat landscape, for the most part, overnight, dramatically increased, right? So especially in healthcare, there wasn't typically a lot of folks that worked remote, worked from home, worked in alternate locations, right? And overnight that changed. So in BJC's case, we had about 4,500 people that literally in 1 week were told, okay, you're working from home, and here, oh, by the way, here's new tools, Microsoft 365, that you're going to use to do that. And here's the guidelines and the guardrails that you should use when you're working with documents and all that kind of stuff, right? So that was a shock, right, when we went through that. And I think we've got to more normal, right? So we've figured out, how do we do those things securely? How do we enable the workforce to do what they need to when they're in a location? And where are those situations where we say, you know what, we're just not going to allow remote work because it's just too dangerous or too risky for whatever reason. So we've kind of, that teeter totter of efficiency versus security. We've been tottering for a while on that. I think it's not as dramatic of a shift anymore. It's kind of this, it's always that back and forth, right? So we're just kind of leaning here and there on a risk posture and what we're doing around it. So
yeah, certainly keeps it interesting with the ebbs and flows, given any given Sunday, any given week, right? Any given day. What are you most proud of this, last couple of years, personally and professionally? Again, given the pandemic and given everything we've had to do.
The most proud of, I guess what I'm most proud of is really the team I have been able to, or that we have been able to create. Behind every good program is people that make it real,
right,
and partners that make it real.
Yeah.
And so I think we've done good job over the last, again, 5 years, really focusing on what are those fundamentals we have to have in place? What are those key capabilities? Who are the right resources that can help us get there? And who are the right partners that are going to help us get there? Because we're not going to do it ourselves. And so we have to figure out what is that right balance. And we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect, I don't think. But I think I've got a solid team, right? When people ask me what keeps me up at night, I say, not a whole lot, right? I mean, maybe the ability to recover, maybe the ability to, the unknown unknowns, right? But I'm confident that my team's going to be able to see something. We're going to be able to react to something. We're going to be able to respond and contain.
Yeah.
And those are huge, right? And the key things that I really focused on to build the program around. And we're pretty good at the proactive, right? So from what everybody tells me on our endpoint security, on some of the data security things that we're doing, I think we're keeping up with the Joneses and maybe a little bit better.
Yeah. Resiliency is so key. And you're right. Like, as long as there's things out there we can't control, so why let it bother your sleep, right? As long as you can respond, recover appropriately. That's a great way to think about it. If you could go back in time, what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
And the short answer is patience. I've never been a very patient person. And I had this boss at one time in my career tell me, you just need more bake time. And I hated that answer. But he's so right. Looking back on it, because, I think when you first start, or even if you've had a career for a while, you think you have it pretty solid. And it's kind of like, the old book of what got you here isn't going to get you there, right? It's
absolutely,
you have to constantly change. You have to constantly learn. And that bake time, you just need time to get experience. You just need time to make mistakes. You need time to have successes, right? I think that's the biggest thing that I would give to my younger self, to say, listen to that boss, because he actually knows what he's talking.
Enjoy the journey, enjoy the ride.
Absolutely.
So good. Outside of healthcare, IT, cyber, what's your passion? What are you most passionate about if you're not doing the job?
Yeah. So I
think this is where we get to have a little fun, maybe an unblur your screen.
I guess so. So I'll turn my blur off and we can just
look at that.
So there you go. So there's my passion right now. So I am a droid builder as a hobby, and what that is, obviously got R2D2 here, and you have right there is R5J2, which is a very little known Imperial droid, but I'm going to totally geek out. So I've always been Disney fan, always been Star Wars fan and things like that. And the pandemic hit, and I said, gosh, I love graphic design. I love electronics. I like doing things with my hands. And my son brought home a 3D printer.
There you go.
and I was like, this is pretty cool. So I ended up printing R2's dome. And both of those are, by the way, are fully 3D printed. So I printed R2's dome on my son's printer. And then I invested more in other printers and did some other things. But yeah, it's been so fun and so rewarding, because it's not only is it a hobby and something that I really enjoy doing, but it ultimately gives back. And that's what I'm about, right? I'm about service and the service-minded aspect of things. And so with the copyright rules and all the things that we need to do with Disney and Lucasfilm here, we can't do anything for a profit with these, right? And there's a global group that actually does this work. I want to say it's at last count about 20,000 members. And so everything we do is charity. Everything we do is for public. So as an example, on May the 4th, this past May, we went to Children's Hospital here in St. Louis and visited with over 100 patients in their rooms, and just brought joy to them. Right. And just had fun. We opened up an accessible playground not too long ago, and, spent some time with the kids in the accessible playground, and, And of course we do Comic-Cons and things like that, and just, hang out and do some of those fun things. We had a radio station that wanted to have us out and just talk with them and things like that. Right. So it's just, again, it's things for fun. It really energizes me. And it's really
and that's remote active. You said you have a remote control. Those things move and.
Yeah. So they're not on right now, but basically all the lights, everything, screen accurate, dome moves, panels move, arms come out. And it's fully remote control.
Video of Princess Leia.
What's that?
A video of Princess Leia.
Not the video, but I have the audio of it. Yes.
Oh, do you have the audio? Of course you do.
There are some people in the group that have started to little projectors in. Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah. So that's the exciting thing. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm usually doing something with my wife and kids and that kind of thing. Yeah. So it's just
nice.
Love having
Thank
fun.
you for sharing that with the listeners. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this question. This is the Risk Never Sleeps podcast. What is the riskiest thing, Matt, you've ever done?
But I think the thing that I came up with was when we got married. I think I mentioned it before, kind of my origin stuff. Mm-hmm. Had a degree, wanted to go into graphic design, was trying to stick it out and do that. Didn't have a job. We decided we got married literally a month after we got out of college. My wife still had a semester to go in college. And on top of it, my parents were in between houses. They were moving from the house I grew up in to a new house, and they were in an apartment, did not have room for me.
Oh no.
College, right? So I had to find a place to live, and I had to figure out how I was going to pay for things. And I got married, and my wife's still going to college. And so just that unknown, right? Of like, okay, well, we're just going to figure it out. Right. And that was the conversation we had. We're just going to figure this out and see what happens. And thank goodness things worked out, and I was able to get that job at Edward Jones, and this history. So it's just,
I've had a similar journey. I love that. I slept on a friend's couch for a couple months. Same thing. I had no place to go. I was getting married eventually. And so,
luckily my brother and family were all like, oh, you can hang here. I was like, yeah, but I'm going to get married. And, there's all this stuff. Right. So
this has been terrific. Any last thoughts for our listeners, anyone breaking into maybe cybersecurity as a profession or thinking about getting into healthcare?
Yeah. I don't, not much more than we already said, but what I would say is, the same thing I tell a lot of people that are looking at security, and they're saying, gosh, I just don't have the skills, or I don't think I have the skills. Right. And for me, it's about, do you have the passion, right? Do you have the desire and the excitement around this kind of field or this kind of thing, right? Security in general. And do you have the aptitude, right? Are you willing to learn? Are you able to learn? Are you able to deal with change? Are you able to deal with what I call as the gray, right? Because a lot of times I'll see a lot of folks in security that are totally black or white. Like it's either right or it's wrong. Right?
Yeah.
And all of our job, especially in risk management, is the gray. Is like, okay, it's never going to be perfect. How do we fix it and make it as perfect as it can be? So it's those kinds of things that I think really can frustrate people if they're really in that mode of, good versus evil and black versus white or something like that. So it's, can you deal with the gray? Do you have the aptitude? Do you have the attitude and the passion? And if you do, great. I want to talk to you, right? And I'm sure my colleagues want to talk to you as well, because we're looking for people to help us.
That's great. That's a great way to end. Thank you, Matt. And thanks, listeners. This is Ed Gaudet from the Risk Never Sleeps podcast. If you're on the front lines protecting patient safety and care delivery, remember to stay vigilant because risk never sleeps.